Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Today Television. I'm Sakshi Patra and it's Friday and it's also a day which is always akin to be talked about, like we talk about box office on this day a lot. So why not, we thought that we will make you meet the viewers of Business Today Television somebody very interesting today on this show. One of the veterans of the film industry is now joining in, Mr. Siddharth Roy Kapur, one of India's leading film producers and the managing director of Roy Kapur Films, is now joining in to chat about everything from business of Bollywood to the future of Indian cinema, from OTT trends and many more things. So let's welcome Mr. Siddharth Roy Kapur on this show. Siddharth, warm welcome and thank you so much for taking the time out for this discussion. Well, first up, of course, your journey in the entertainment industry has actually been nothing short of transformative. You've actually seen a career that spanned television, film production, studio leadership, so much more. Tell us at the outset, as somebody who's witnessed multiple transitions in the industry, what is it that at this point exciting you the most about the current setup in the Indian cinema and its future?
Firstly, thanks for having me, Sakshi. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we're at a really exciting time. As you said, when you referred to the number of years that I've spent in the industry, which I'm afraid dates me, we used to be in a position where we'd be fighting for theatrical distribution in markets around the world, whether it was South America, whether it was Africa. There'd be one or two prints that we could distribute in those countries, and it was so difficult to get our content to be seen, around the world, other than just the South Asian diaspora. But today, with the streaming platforms that really take your content to more than 190 countries on the click of a button, you have access to the audiences around the world on the day and date on which your content is launched in India. And I think that gives us the tremendous challenge and the tremendous opportunity to make sure that we can now reach out to the entire world with our content, which we were not able to do earlier. And I think that, if you ask me in a nutshell, if you ask me to really simplify what I feel is the biggest opportunity for the Indian media and the Indian content industry going forward, is to be able to create content that really is able to reach out to the world.
Absolutely. So, Siddharth, how has the audience's demand for content really changed in the last few years, especially post the pandemic, when we actually saw, one-way trajectory move for the OTT industry, the way they have shot up during the times when people were locked in their homes. There was nothing else to do, and all they could do is to consume content right sitting in their homes. So, tell us, are there more demands? Are there more open to experimental genres, narratives? How are the things progressing on that account?
So there was a change that was happening even before the pandemic, where people were exposed to more and more content from around the world, and frankly from around our own country, where you were earlier not consuming content from different languages within the same country. But what the pandemic, I think, forced within that narrow 2-year time band is, because people had the amount of disposable time that they had on their hands, and they obviously wanted leisure and entertainment to fill their anxious days. They watched content from all around the world and all around India. And really, language barriers and geographical boundaries have collapsed in a way where today you've got audiences that are now exposed to the best content from around the world and around the country. And therefore, that actually leads you into a place where the audience has become that much more discerning. They're that much more demanding. They want you to give them something unique, something differentiated, something special. But what they're also telling you is that if you are able to give them that, then they will come in hordes. And you're seeing that with a lot of the movies that have worked after the pandemic are actually becoming much more bigger at the box office than they would have been before, which means the audience is deciding that they will save up and come for those X number of films every year. But when they come for them, they will come in large numbers. And you're seeing incredible numbers at the box office because of that. Correspondingly, I guess what also happens is that if a film is not appreciated and doesn't work, today audiences have many other choices. And therefore, those films tend not to perform well theatrically at all. I guess the silver lining is that even films like that now have a life on streaming platforms, a life on satellite television. Their music can still continue to do well. So I think generally it's a good time for the content business. It's a challenging time because audiences have become more demanding. But I think that can only help us to up our game.
Absolutely. But like you talked about, the slowdown that the industry really initially felt, the knee-jerk reaction, so to speak, to the OTT invasion, if we can call it. Now, is the industry still reeling under the OTT pressure as much as before? Is the slowdown still going to be far too much longer than we had initially anticipated? What exactly is the situation, since you are right there in it, and you can see the pulse and feel the pulse right there?
I don't see OTT as a pressure at all. I see it as a new means of distribution of content. And whenever any new technology has come in, always in the past, there has been a certain amount of anxiety, a certain amount of wondering about the future of the pre-existing, modes of distribution. So when cinema came in, people thought radio would die. When television came in, people thought cinema would die. When the laser disc and the and the DVD came in, they thought that the VHS would. So you've had these phases, and you've had these these phases of technological disruption that occur. I think as content creators, what we should do is embrace technology and say that what is it? It's really one more means of your content reaching out to people. It's a more convenient way of people being able to access your content, when they want, in the fashion in which they want, at the pace at which they want. And I think you need to embrace it and make content for all kinds of modes. So make movies for theatrical, make movies for streaming, make series for streaming. Because the kind of stories that you can tell today as content creators has multiplied. And I think everyone in the business should really take advantage of that.
Right, but at the same time, I feel like asking you, we've actually seen some, brilliant series also being created in the recent part from the Indian makers as well. Filmmakers have also jumped into it. We've seen series like Hira Mandi, but at the same time, the costs of making those series were so high. So I do not know whether they actually made the business that they were aspiring to. So is that really a challenge that you see at this point in time? Creating content from those, marquee filmmakers for the Indian OTT platforms, creating it at that cost, but having to make the business as much. Is it really creating it?
Well, I think if you talk to the executives at any of the streaming platforms, they'll tell you that Hira Mandi did incredibly well really, really well for Netflix. That's a global phenomenon. When you look at Game of Thrones, or you look at The Crown, or you look at Stranger Things, or you look at any of these shows, the budgets are enormous. But obviously, the platforms and the channels are seeing a benefit in investing that kind of money in these series because there is a business rationale for it. And similarly in India as well. I mean, Hira Mandi was probably our most expensive show, but it would, I mean, when you compare it to the budget of one episode of The Crown or of Game of Thrones, it will pale in comparison. So I do think that it's still actually there's even a further ceiling to how much more ambitious we can get with regard to our ability to tell all kinds of stories, and the budgets will obviously therefore go higher. But clearly the demand is there. Clearly streaming platforms intend to be able to make much more ambitious content because they intend to lure more and more subscribers into the fold.
Right. But you also made a very valid point when you're talking about, we are not just competing here internally with the regional languages, we're also competing with the global content right there. And we've actually seen beyond Hollywood. Now we are seeing even Pan-Asian content, Korean content that actually has got a lot of eyeballs from the Indian viewers as well. So people are looking at, a vast variety of what is getting created as content even beyond what they can imagine. And they, beat the cultural differences in these, countries as well, but they're looking forward to understanding their stories. So as an Indian creator of the content on OTT and on films, how do you think this challenge will be met or overcome to deal with such massive content being created globally too?
No, I think you put your finger on something quite valid, which is that, I mean, a country like Korea has, in the last 2 decades, managed to make them the Korean decades. They're with their music, with their food, with their films, with their television. The soft culture of that country has really managed to permeate across the globe. And I think the next couple of decades should be India's decades to do the same thing. We now have the means of distribution for our content to actually be able to be seen by the whole world. And I think we as content creators need to take on that onus of saying, okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have our Squid Game, or we're going to have our Parasite, or we're going to have our equivalent to the K dramas that have done so well. And why shouldn't we do that? So, fingers crossed that the next couple of decades will be India's time to take our soft power across the world the way that Korea has managed to do so effectively.
Okay, and which part of the Indian content do you see right now being capable of becoming, say, the next Squid Game, or producing the next Money Heist, or some such series which have been most popular across the globe?
The beauty is you never know what content will resonate when in another culture. When we made Dangal, right? This story of a Haryanvi wrestler with two kids, with two daughters. How could we have ever imagined that it will do $200 million in China? And this is from local audiences. We're not even talking that there is no significant, Indian diaspora audience in China. We're talking about local audiences.
You on a macro level now, I want to understand, the competition is not just between, local and global content. It's also on the players, space as well. We are seeing just about a duopoly or maybe three players which have maximum subscriptions in terms of viewers, and, those who are absorbing this content right here. But do you actually see going forward from here, there will be more mergers and consolidations? The smaller players will actually get merged into the bigger ones, or do you think that this space has much more to accommodate even more and newer players getting into this space?
As does usually happen in most new businesses, you have a lot of players entering right at the start. And the same thing happened in the streaming business as well. I think at the peak, there were almost a 50 sort of OTT platforms that coexisted at one point of time. But since then, there has been a fair amount of, the like sort of consolidation that you spoke about, and some players that did not really reach a scale where they could continue have folded up. Some have merged into other entities, but you still have a fair number of platforms out there that are quite well capitalized and intend to invest in the market going forward. So I don't think we're in danger of it becoming a duopoly or three players anytime soon. I think you'll always have at least 5 to 6 well-capitalized players looking to invest in the market. And I think for content creators, that's a great thing.
And another thing, you were talking about, how the next decade could be how India's content could travel globally, and it could be India's decade in terms of the way Indian content is, consumed across the globe as well. What else would you really need as a support from, say, the government, over here to really provide that thrust? Do you think there could be a future with the way the broadcast will? We've been waiting for a long time. Is that the need of the hour right now? Will that provide the extra fill-up? Because right now we still see a lot of concerns around, how the censor board really provides that certificate or not. There is a lot of challenge that we continue to talk about. What will be the need of the hour?
So I can start by saying the areas where I don't think we need any assistance. Where I don't think we need any assistance is in the content creation itself, in the ambition, in the imagination, in the talent that we put into it, in our own ability to basically make stuff that goes out and resonates in the world. Where I do think we need some support is in at least the authorities backing the freedom of expression of the industry to be able to tell all kinds of stories, and making sure that elements that look for their 15 minutes of fame from time to time because the industry is such a soft target, pulling them down, sort of taking objection to things that don't really need to be taken objection to. If the authorities are able to come in and take a stand there and be more liberal in the approach with regard to the way that they view those kind of issues, that will send a signal within civil society that the authorities are not going to pander to those instances that happen now and then. And I think then you'll see a much more fertile expression of all kinds of stories being told, of risks being taken in the ways that those stories are told, and that is going to help us tremendously in being able to reach out to the world.
Okay. Another thing that I wanted to understand from you is on the role of newer technologies, AI, in the future of creating content from Indian films and Indian OTT. How are you looking at that role being played by these newer technologies? Do you see a lot of disruption on the way these content will be created in the near future?
I do see a lot of disruption in that space. And I think it's very important for us to firstly understand the tool, secondly, embrace it and use it to the best of its ability to where it can help us most efficiently. And I think that's in the area of reducing times, from start to finish of a project, in the cost efficiencies that it might entail. Just to give you an example, the pre-production process right now could take anywhere from 3 to 9 months, depending on the scale of a project. What AI can help you do is really crunch that process and crunch your number one in terms of time, number two in terms of cost, and get you much more better set up and more efficient in the way that you go into production. That's just one example. Then in the course of production, in the course of post production, in the course of marketing and distribution, there are so many areas where I do think AI can be a tremendous help, both on cost efficiencies and on quality. Where I think you're always going to need the human touches in the areas of acting and direction and writing and all the technical aspects of filmmaking with regard to cinematography and sound design, and those are areas where I don't think you can take out the human element. But we do need to understand, and embrace the things within AI that can help us just make better movies and make them at better budgets.
Right, absolutely. So you're talking about the cost efficiency project, part, and I wanted to also discuss with you some more things when it comes to the costs. The huge staff fees that the producers are reeling under right now. And you yourself have been a producer. Then there is the cost of the entourage as well. So that's been also one of the hottest topics of discussions and debates right now as to how should producers be dealing with all of this. Major part of creating the movies or the content is actually going to the stars in the entourage. What is your stance there, and what would you like to say?
I think there's no doubt that, we have to look at all areas of cost. But I think what happens with star fees and with entourage costs is that tends to become the topic of discussion because it's the spiciest part of the budget that gets the most eyeballs in terms of, creating a controversy around it. There are lots of other areas within the production cost of a film that also need a lot of rationalizing and efficiency. When it comes to star fees and entourage costs, I believe, and I hope the industry is moving in this way. I know there are discussions happening where there's an overall fee for the star, and the entourage cost should then be taken care of within that fee by the star. That I think would be the most efficient way to be able to handle it, because then you don't need to get into the size of the entourage, the composition of the entourage, etc., because it's something that the actor or the next sort of actress takes responsibility for, and that comes out of their fee. And that can just be one consolidated fee. That'll take the pain out of the system, I think.
What is the trend globally on that aspect also? Is that something that the industry has been thinking about too?
I'm sure there are lots of, globally also, I guess the whole, discussion around AI was the big discussion that was happening globally when the writers' contracts and the directors' contracts were being renewed. So that I think would be the biggest one. I haven't heard of entourage costs being something that they discuss very actively, because I think there's a more streamlined system to it there probably. Here that seems to be something that's bubbling up. But I do think that we're moving in the direction of just making it a consolidated fee and letting the entourage cost come out of that.
Right. And as we move towards the last part of our conversation, I'm sure all of our viewers are really excited to know what are the newer projects that they can expect from you, and what are you working on, and what kind of a content can we expect going forward? Is there already a massive lineup that you could share with our viewers?
Sure. So we've got Deva, which is an action thriller with Shahid Kapoor that releases on the 14th of Feb. Roshan Andrews is the director. Pooja Hegde plays in the film opposite Shahid. And that's a film that we're really looking forward to. That's a Valentine's Day release. It's an action thriller, so it's going to be a violent Valentine's as far as that film is concerned. And then we've got Matka King, which is a show on Amazon Prime that will be releasing later in the year next year. Vijay Verma is playing the role of the Matka King. The show is directed by Nagaraj Manjule, who I've admired for many, many years and been wanting to work with. So that's the other very exciting, piece of content that we're working on. We've then got lots of other series and films in development that I'd like to announce at the right time around the platforms or the studios. We've also got The Anarchy, which is the book by William Dalrymple, based on the story of the East India Company that we're adapting as a global, project. That's well into development right now, and there'll be some interesting things to discuss on that probably in the course of next year.
That sounds a lot exciting. I wish you all the very best, Mr. Kapoor, and thank you so much for sparing all that time to share with our viewers what is actually happening in the world of entertainment right now, and truly appreciate your time with us on Business Today Television.
Thanks so much, Sakshi.
All right, and with that, viewers, we've got you an exclusive with Mr. Siddharth Roy Kapur right there as to understanding the latest trends in the film industry as well as in the Indian content space, and what can you expect going forward from here. I hope this has got you some more insights and an interesting interaction right there. But do stay tuned. Up next will be a lot of coverage as far as the business news and the markets news are concerned. Stay tuned.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.